22-year-old Vanessa Mitchell thought she knew what discipline meant when she enlisted in the Army. She'd grown up in rural Montana, worked summers on her grandfather's ranch, and pushed herself through grueling high school athletics. But nothing prepared her for what 6 fellow soldiers would put her through at Fort Braxton, North Carolina. What started as harmless pranks escalated into something far more sinister until the day Colonel James Harrington discovered what was really happening in the barracks. The confrontation that followed would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The North Carolina humidity hit Vanessa like a wall the moment she stepped off the bus at Fort Braxton. Her duffel bag felt heavier with each step toward the towering brick buildings that would be her home for the next several months. Advanced infantry training was supposed to be the bridge between basic training and her first real assignment. But as she looked around at the imposing structures and perfectly manicured grounds, she wondered if she'd made the right choice. Vanessa had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates at Clearwater High were worried about prom dates and college applications, she was helping her grandfather repair fences and learning to drive his old Ford pickup through mountain terrain. Her decision to enlist surprised no one who really knew her, but it had caused a rift with her mother that still hadn't fully healed. "You're throwing your life away, Vanessa," her mother had said during their last phone call before deployment. "You could have gone to State University on that scholarship." But Vanessa wasn't interested in 4 more years of sitting in classrooms. She wanted purpose, structure, and the chance to serve something bigger than herself. The Army had promised her all of that. Her assigned barracks was Building C, 3rd floor. The metal stairs clanged under her boots as she climbed, passing other soldiers who barely glanced in her direction. Room 312 would be shared with 3 other women, but when she pushed open the door, she found only one occupant. "You must be Mitchell," said a petite blonde woman sitting on one of the bottom bunks. "I'm Sarah Chen, got here yesterday from Fort Leonard Wood." Sarah's appearance was deceiving. Despite being barely 5 feet tall, she had the calloused hands of someone who'd worked hard her entire life. Her accent carried traces of Texas, and when she smiled, there was a toughness in her eyes that reminded Vanessa of the ranch hands back home. "Where are our other roommates?" Vanessa asked, dropping her duffel bag on the empty bunk across from Sarah's. "Rodriguez is in medical school, getting some paperwork sorted out. Williams transferred out yesterday. Apparently, she couldn't handle the workload here." Sarah's expression suggested she had little sympathy for quitters. The room was sparse but functional. 4 bunks, 4 lockers, 2 small windows that looked out onto the training grounds. Vanessa began unpacking her few possessions, carefully folding her civilian clothes and placing them in the bottom drawer of her assigned locker. Everything had to be perfect here. That much she'd learned in basic training. "Word of advice," Sarah said, watching Vanessa organize her belongings with military precision. "The guys in Alpha Company think they run this place. They've been here longer than most of us, and they don't particularly like sharing facilities with women." Vanessa paused in her unpacking. "What kind of problems are we talking about?" "Nothing official, just territorial behavior, making sure we know we're outsiders." The next morning, Vanessa met the 6 men who would make her life miserable for the next several weeks. Alpha Company senior privates were led by Danny Kozlovsky, a stocky man from Detroit with arms covered in tattoos and a permanent sneer. His followers included Marcus Thompson, a tall Texan who never seemed to stop chewing tobacco, Jake Morrison, whose New Jersey accent grated on everyone's nerves, Tyler Banks, who compensated for his slight build with aggressive posturing, Luis Rivera, who went along with whatever the group decided, and Kevin Walsh, whose red hair and freckles made him look younger than his 24 years. They controlled the common areas of the barracks like a pack of wolves defending territory. The television in the recreation room was always tuned to whatever they wanted to watch. The best washing machines were perpetually claimed by their laundry. Even the refrigerator space was divided according to their preferences, with clear boundaries that the women were expected to respect. At first, their behavior seemed like typical military hazing. Vanessa's towel would disappear from the bathroom hook, Her boots would be moved from where she'd left them. Small inconveniences that could be explained away as forgetfulness or coincidence. But Kozlovsky had bigger plans. It started during the second week of training. Vanessa returned to her room after a particularly brutal day on the obstacle course to find a note taped to her locker. Bathroom duty, Building C, Level 2, tonight 2100. Don't be late. Management. She showed the note to Sarah, who frowned as she read it. "This isn't official," Sarah said. "I've never seen anything like this format in any of our duty rosters. Should I ignore it?"
I don't know. What if it's legitimate and you get written up for failure to comply? That evening, Vanessa reported to the second-floor bathroom at exactly 2100 hours. She found Kozlovsky waiting for her, along with Thompson and Morrison. "About time, Mitchell," Kozlovsky said. "We've been discussing the situation here, and we think there's been some confusion about responsibilities." "What situation?" "See, this is a military facility. Everything needs to be maintained to proper standards. But it seems like some people think they can just use the facilities without contributing to their upkeep." Thompson spat into a cup he was carrying. "What Danny's trying to say is that you ladies have been enjoying clean bathrooms without doing your fair share of the work." Vanessa felt her chest tighten. "I clean up after myself. We all do." "Not according to our observations," Morrison added. "Those toilets don't scrub themselves, and the guys in Alpha Company have been picking up the slack." Kozlovsky reached into a supply closet and pulled out a bucket, rubber gloves, and toilet brush. "So, here's how it's going to work. You're going to help us maintain proper standards, starting tonight." "This isn't an official duty assignment," Vanessa said. "I want to see the paperwork." "The paperwork?" Kozlovsky laughed. "Lady, this is the Army. Sometimes you get orders, sometimes you get guidance, and sometimes you get friendly suggestions. This is a friendly suggestion." The three men positioned themselves between Vanessa and the door, not blocking it exactly, but making it clear that leaving wouldn't be as simple as walking away. "One bathroom," Thompson said. "It shouldn't take more than an hour if you do it right." Vanessa looked at the cleaning supplies, then at the men surrounding her. Every instinct told her to refuse, to push past them and report this to their drill instructor. But a small voice in her head whispered doubts. What if this was some kind of test? What if refusing would mark her as unable to handle military life? She took the supplies. The bathroom was already clean by military standards, but Kozlovsky insisted on perfection. Every tile had to be scrubbed. Every fixture had to shine. The mirrors needed to be spotless, and the floors required multiple passes with the mop. The men watched her work, offering commentary and criticism. "Missed a spot there, Mitchell. That's not how you're supposed to hold the brush. My grandmother could clean faster than that." It took nearly 2 hours to meet their standards. When Vanessa finally finished, her knees were sore from kneeling, her back ached from bending, and her hands were raw despite the rubber gloves. "Not bad for a first try," Kozlovsky said, inspecting her work like a drill sergeant examining a footlocker. "Same time tomorrow night." "Tomorrow?" "Daily maintenance, Mitchell. That's how you keep things military standard." Vanessa wanted to argue, wanted to tell them exactly what she thought of their friendly suggestion. But she was exhausted, confused, and still not entirely sure whether this was legitimate or not. She returned to her room to find Sarah waiting with a concerned expression. "How did it go?" Sarah asked. "Fine," Vanessa lied. "Just some extra cleaning duty." But it wasn't fine, and it wasn't going to get better. The next night, Rivera and Banks joined the supervision crew. The bathroom they assigned her was larger, dirtier, and came with more specific requirements. "See this grout?" Banks pointed to the area between tiles. "That's not white enough. I need bleach." "The toilet paper has to be folded into perfect triangles," Rivera added. "And don't forget the light fixtures," Morrison called out. "Dust accumulates up there." Each night brought new demands, new bathrooms, new standards, new humiliations. By the end of the first week, all 6 men were participating. They'd developed a rotation system where 2 or 3 would supervise while the others handled their own evening activities. They brought folding chairs to make themselves comfortable during the process. Walsh, who had seemed like the most reasonable of the group, turned out to be the cruelest supervisor. "You know what your problem is, Mitchell," he said on the 4th night, watching her scrub a particularly stubborn stain from a toilet bowl. "You think too much. This isn't complicated. You're here to clean, we're here to make sure you do it right. Accept your role, and everyone's happy."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "My role is to be a soldier," Vanessa said without looking up. "Your role is whatever we say it is, and right now, we're saying it's a janitor." The other men laughed at this, and Vanessa felt something break inside her chest. Not her spirit exactly, but something close to it. The part of her that had believed the army would be different from the small-town politics and petty cruelties she'd known growing up. Sarah noticed the change immediately. "You're not sleeping," Sarah observed one morning as they prepared for PT, "and you're getting quieter every day. What's going on with these cleaning assignments?" "It's fine," Vanessa repeated, "just extra duty." But Sarah wasn't buying it anymore. "Show me the paperwork." "There isn't any paperwork." "Then it's not official. Vanessa, you need to report this." "Report what? That I'm cleaning bathrooms? That's not exactly cruel and unusual punishment." "Report that you're being singled out for non-official duties. Report that you're being harassed." Vanessa shook her head. "I can handle it." She told herself she could handle it right up until the night Kozlowski decided cleaning toilets wasn't humiliating enough. The turning point came on a Thursday night when Kozlowski brought a camera. "Quality control," he announced, setting up his phone on a makeshift tripod made from stacked books. "We need to document proper cleaning techniques for training purposes." Vanessa stared at the device, its red recording light blinking like an evil eye. "You're not filming me." "Actually, we are," Thompson said, positioning himself between Vanessa and the phone. "This is educational material, standard military documentation. Show me the authorization." Morrison pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. At first glance, it looked official. Military letterhead, typed text, signatures at the bottom. But as Vanessa read more carefully, she realized it was a masterful forgery. The language was wrong, the format slightly off, and one of the signatures belonged to a captain who'd been transferred months ago. "This is fake," she said. "Prove it," Banks challenged. "File a complaint. See how far that gets you." The threat was clear. They knew she wouldn't report them because doing so would require explaining why she'd been following their orders in the first place. They'd trapped her in a web of compliance and complicity, and now they were tightening the strands. Walsh activated the camera's recording function. "Bathroom maintenance tutorial, session 1. The subject will demonstrate proper military standard cleaning procedures." The next hour was the worst of Vanessa's military career. Every movement was scrutinized, critiqued, and captured on video. They made her repeat sections until they were satisfied with the footage. They insisted on close-up shots of her scrubbing toilets, detailed recordings of her on hands and knees cleaning tile grout. "Make sure you get that angle," Rivera directed Walsh, who was operating the camera. "Really shows the attention to detail required." When it was over, Vanessa felt violated in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. They hadn't just made her clean, they'd turned her humiliation into entertainment. "Same time tomorrow," Kozlowski said, pocketing his phone. "We'll work on advanced techniques." Vanessa stumbled back to her room, where she found Sarah with Rodriguez, their third roommate who'd finally returned from her extended medical processing. "Jesus, Vanessa," Rodriguez said, taking in her appearance, "you look like you've been hit by a truck." Maria Rodriguez was a compact woman from Arizona with kind eyes and the steady demeanor of someone who'd raised 4 younger siblings. She'd missed the escalation of Vanessa's situation, but she immediately sensed something was wrong. "What's happening with these cleaning assignments?" Rodriguez asked.
Sarah filled me in on the basics, but this seems excessive. Vanessa collapsed onto her bunk without removing her boots. It's under control, she repeated. No, it's not, Sarah said firmly. They filmed you tonight. I saw them setting up equipment when I passed the bathroom. That's not standard procedure for anything. Rodriguez sat down on the edge of Vanessa's bunk. Look, I know we don't know each other well yet, but I've been in the military for 3 years. This isn't how things work. Nobody gets assigned individual cleaning duty every single night, especially not with supervision and documentation. Then why haven't I gotten written up for missing official duties? Vanessa asked. If this isn't legitimate, where are the real assignments I'm supposed to be doing? Rodriguez and Sarah exchanged glances. It was a fair question, and they didn't have a good answer. Maybe they're covering for you, Sarah suggested, taking care of your actual duties so you're available for their games.
The implications of that possibility made Vanessa's stomach turn. If they were manipulating the duty rosters, this conspiracy went deeper than simple harassment. It suggested planning, coordination, and a level of systematic abuse that would be impossible to dismiss as pranks or hazing. The next morning brought a new wrinkle. Vanessa discovered her laundry had been moved from the washing machine to the floor, where it had been mixed with muddy water and what looked like motor oil. "Oops," Morrison said when she confronted him about it. "Accidents happen. Maybe if you were more careful about when you used the machines, things like this wouldn't occur." The message was clear. Resistance would bring escalation. That evening, the 6 men were waiting for her with new equipment. Professional-grade cleaning supplies, additional cameras, and what appeared to be a script. "Tonight's special," Kozlovsky announced. "We're doing a complete training video. Multiple angles, commentary track, the works." "I'm not doing this anymore," Vanessa said. "Yes, you are," Thompson replied. "Because if you don't, these videos we've already shot might accidentally end up in the wrong hands. Your drill instructor's hands, your commanding officer's hands, maybe even your family's hands." Walsh held up his phone, showing her a video thumbnail of herself on her knees scrubbing a toilet. Funny how these things can go viral these days. The blackmail was explicit now. They weren't just demanding compliance, they were ensuring it through threat of public humiliation. Vanessa looked at the 6 faces surrounding her, searching for any sign of conscience or mercy. She found none. These men had crossed a line from harassment into something darker, and they were enjoying every minute of her degradation. "You have 30 seconds to decide," Banks said. "Cooperate, or we start sharing your greatest hits compilation." The bathroom they led her to that night was the worst yet, a facility that had been deliberately sabotaged. Toilets clogged with foreign objects, mirrors smeared with substances she didn't want to identify, floors covered with a mixture that smelled like rotten eggs and industrial chemicals. "Advanced cleaning techniques," Rivera explained while adjusting one of 3 cameras. "This is graduate-level maintenance work." They'd turned her situation into a production. Walsh served as director, positioning cameras and calling for specific shots. Morrison provided commentary, describing her techniques in clinical detail that somehow made the whole thing more degrading. Thompson operated a handheld camera for close-ups, getting uncomfortably near while she worked. The others rotated between supervisory roles, each adding their own demands and criticisms. "Move slower," Banks instructed. "We want to capture the full process." "Hold that position," Kozlovsky added. "The lighting's perfect right there." They kept her there for over 3 hours, making her clean the same surfaces repeatedly until they got the footage they wanted. By the time they finished, Vanessa was barely functioning. Her hands were raw, her knees were bleeding through her pants, and her spirit was completely broken. "Outstanding work," Walsh said, reviewing footage on his camera. "This is going to make excellent training material." As she gathered the cleaning supplies, Vanessa made a decision that surprised her. Instead of returning them to the closet, she carried them with her. "Where are you going with those?" Morrison demanded. "To clean more bathrooms," Vanessa said. "Isn't that what you want?"
The men looked confused by her sudden compliance, but they followed her as she walked to the next bathroom down the hall. Without being told, she began scrubbing toilets with mechanical precision. "What's she doing?" Rivera whispered to Kozlovsky. "I don't know, but keep filming." Vanessa worked through the night, moving from bathroom to bathroom throughout the building. The 6 men followed her like a bizarre parade, documenting her increasingly frantic cleaning efforts. She scrubbed with intensity that bordered on obsession, attacking every surface as if her life depended on achieving perfect cleanliness. By 400 hours, she had cleaned every bathroom in Building C. Her hands were bleeding, her uniform was soaked with sweat and cleaning chemicals, and her eyes had taken on a glassy, distant quality that worried even her tormentors. "Mitchell," Kozlovsky said uncertainly, "you can stop now." But Vanessa didn't stop. She moved on to the sinks in the hallway, then the water fountains, then the floors. She was cleaning everything she could reach with single-minded determination that had clearly crossed from compliance into something resembling a psychological break.
"Somebody needs to stop her," Walsh said, lowering his camera for the first time all night. It was Sarah who finally intervened. She'd been looking for Vanessa since 20 hours and found the strange procession on the building's ground floor. "Vanessa," Sarah said gently, placing a hand on her friend's shoulder, "you need to come back to the room." Vanessa looked up with eyes that didn't seem to recognize anything around her. "I have to finish cleaning," she mumbled. "Have to get it right." Sarah helped her to her feet and guided her away from the supplies. The 6 men watched in uncomfortable silence as their victim was led away, the implications of what they'd done finally beginning to register. But their cruelty wasn't finished yet. The next morning would bring their most devastating betrayal, and the event that would finally attract the attention of Colonel James Harrington. The final betrayal came during morning formation. Vanessa had managed only 2 hours of sleep after Sarah helped her back to their room. Her hands were bandaged, her knees required medical attention, and Rodriguez had insisted on documenting her injuries with photographs, though Vanessa was too exhausted to understand why. As the company assembled for daily briefings, Vanessa noticed Kozlovsky whispering to Sergeant First Class Peterson, their primary drill instructor. Peterson was a career soldier from Alabama with 15 years of experience and a reputation for fairness that had earned respect throughout Fort Braxton. "Mitchell," Peterson called out after formation, "front and center." Vanessa approached, her stomach sinking as she noticed the smirks on the faces of Alpha Company's senior privates. "I've received some concerning reports about your conduct," Peterson said, holding up a manila folder. "Apparently, you've been engaging in unauthorized activities during evening hours." "Sergeant, I can explain." "Can you explain this?" Peterson opened the folder and showed her printed screenshots from the videos. The images showed her cleaning toilets, but without context, they looked like evidence of someone sneaking around to vandalize the facilities. Kozlovsky had edited the footage masterfully. The videos now showed Vanessa entering bathrooms alone, working frantically in what appeared to be destructive rather than cleaning motions, and behaving in ways that could easily be interpreted as sabotage or mental instability. "Or this?" Peterson continued, showing her a second set of photos documenting the deliberately sabotaged bathroom from the previous night. The images had been taken before she'd cleaned it, but they were time-stamped to suggest she had caused the damage. "Sergeant, those photos are misleading. I was cleaning that mess, not creating it." According to these witnesses, Peterson gestured toward the 6 men standing at attention nearby. "You've been conducting unauthorized cleaning activities that have actually been damaging military property. They've been trying to stop you, but you've refused to listen to reason." The accusation was so perfectly inverted that Vanessa felt dizzy. They'd turned her victimization into evidence of her own misconduct. "That's not what happened," she said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Morrison stepped forward. "Sergeant, we've all been concerned about Private Mitchell's behavior. She's been acting erratically, cleaning obsessively at all hours. We tried to intervene, but she became aggressive when we attempted to stop her." "We have video evidence of her bizarre conduct," Thompson added. "She appears to be having some kind of psychological episode."
Peterson studied the doctored evidence with growing concern. To him, it looked like a clear case of a soldier struggling with mental health issues and potentially damaging military property in the process. Mitchell, you're confined to quarters, pending a full investigation. I'm also recommending you for immediate psychological evaluation. The 6 men exchanged satisfied glances. They'd not only escaped consequences for their abuse, they'd turned their victim into the perpetrator. As Vanessa walked back to Building C under escort, she passed other soldiers who now looked at her with suspicion rather than sympathy. Word was already spreading that she'd been caught vandalizing facilities and behaving erratically. Back in her room, Rodriguez and Sarah were waiting with barely contained fury. "This is insane," Rodriguez said after Vanessa explained what had happened. "They've completely flipped the narrative." "We have to do something," Sarah added. "We can't let them get away with this." But Vanessa had reached her breaking point. "What can we do? They have video evidence, they have witnesses, they've made it look like I'm the problem." "We know the truth," Rodriguez insisted. "The truth doesn't matter if no one believes it."
For the next 2 days, Vanessa remained confined to quarters while the investigation proceeded. She was interviewed by Peterson, by the company commander, and by a military psychologist who seemed convinced she was suffering from a stress-induced breakdown. Meanwhile, Kozlovsky and his crew were being praised for their vigilance in identifying a troubled soldier before she could cause serious damage. The situation might have continued indefinitely if not for Private First Class Amanda Torres. Torres was a communications specialist who worked night shifts in the building's administrative offices. She'd been processing paperwork during many of the incidents, and she'd noticed the unusual activity in the bathrooms. More importantly, she'd seen the true sequence of events. On Saturday morning, Torres requested a meeting with Rodriguez, whom she knew from their shared hometown connections in Arizona. "I need to tell someone what I've really been seeing," Torres said as they sat in the mess hall. "What they're saying about your roommate, it's all wrong." Rodriguez listened as Torres described witnessing Kozlovsky's crew forcing Vanessa into cleaning duties, supervising her work, and filming her humiliation. She'd seen the men enter bathrooms with supplies to deliberately create messes before bringing Vanessa in to clean them. "Why haven't you reported this?" Rodriguez asked. "I tried. I went to Peterson yesterday, but he said the investigation was already complete and they had video evidence proving what really happened. He told me I must have been mistaken about what I saw." "But you're sure about what you witnessed?" "Absolutely. I've been watching this harassment escalate for weeks. Those men have been systematically torturing your friend." Rodriguez felt a surge of hope for the first time since the crisis began. "Would you be willing to testify to what you saw?" "To Peterson? He's already made up his mind." "Not to Peterson, to someone higher up the chain." Torres hesitated. Challenging a completed investigation would be risky for her career. But she joined the military to serve with honor, and watching an innocent soldier be destroyed by lies violated everything she believed in. "Yes," she said finally, "I'll testify." That afternoon, Rodriguez and Torres requested a meeting with Colonel James Harrington, the base commander. Getting an appointment wasn't easy. Junior enlisted personnel didn't typically have direct access to full colonels. But Torres had documented evidence of her night shift observations, and Rodriguez had the photographs of Vanessa's injuries that she'd taken without fully understanding their importance. Colonel Harrington was a 50-year-old career officer from Kentucky who'd earned his position through a combination of tactical brilliance and unwavering integrity. He'd commanded troops in 3 combat deployments and had zero tolerance for the kind of behavior that undermined unit cohesion. The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning in Harrington's office, a Spartanly furnished room dominated by military awards and photographs of his previous commands. "Explain to me why 2 privates are requesting to see me about a closed investigation," Harrington said without preamble. Rodriguez had prepared for this moment, organizing her thoughts and evidence methodically. She began with the timeline of events, starting with the first cleaning assignments and progressing through the escalation of abuse.
She showed him the photographs of Vanessa's injuries, explained the discrepancies in the official story, and introduced Torres as an independent witness. Torres then provided her account, describing in detail what she'd observed from her office windows and during her walks through the building. Her testimony painted a picture of systematic harassment that contradicted every element of the official investigation. Harrington listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. His expression remained neutral, but Rodriguez could see his jaw tightening as the scope of the abuse became clear. "These are serious allegations," he said when they finished. "You're essentially accusing 6 soldiers of conspiracy, harassment, fraud, and abuse. You're also implying that Sergeant Peterson conducted a flawed investigation." "Yes, sir," Rodriguez said. "That's exactly what we're saying." "And you understand the consequences if these allegations prove to be false?" Both women nodded. Harrington studied the photographs of Vanessa's injuries, then reviewed Torres's written statement. After several minutes of silence, he reached for his phone. "Sergeant Major Williams, I need you in my office immediately. And bring the files on the Mitchell investigation." Sergeant Major Patricia Williams was the base's senior enlisted advisor, a woman whose 30-year career had included every challenging situation the military could offer. She arrived within minutes, carrying a thick folder. "Sir, you wanted the Mitchell files?" "I want everything. The original reports, the video evidence, witness statements, Peterson's investigation notes. All of it." As Williams spread the documents across Harrington's desk, the colonel began cross-referencing the official timeline with the account he'd just heard. The discrepancies were immediately apparent. "Sergeant Major, look at this," Harrington said, pointing to Peterson's report. "According to this investigation, Mitchell was observed damaging facilities on Tuesday night, but according to this medical report, she was treated for severe hand injuries on Wednesday morning, injuries consistent with extensive cleaning work, not vandalism." Williams studied the documents with growing alarm. "Sir, this doesn't add up." "No, it doesn't. And look at these video timestamps. They claim to show her acting erratically on Tuesday night, but the metadata shows they were edited on Wednesday afternoon, after the investigation had already begun." The evidence of manipulation was becoming undeniable, but Harrington needed more than inconsistencies. He needed proof of the conspiracy. "I want every security recording from Building C for the past month," he ordered Williams. "Every hallway camera, every entrance, every common area. And I want them before the end of business today." "Yes, sir. I also want Private Mitchell brought to my office, not through official channels. I want her escorted directly here by someone she trusts." As Williams left, Harrington turned back to Rodriguez and Torres. "You two have potentially uncovered serious criminal behavior. If your allegations are proven correct, this will result in court-martial proceedings. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" "We're prepared for whatever it takes to get justice for our friend," Rodriguez answered. "Then we're going to get to the bottom of this. And if those 6 men did what you say they did, they're going to face the full consequences of their actions." The wheels of military justice were finally beginning to turn, and Kozlovsky's carefully constructed lies were about to crumble under the weight of truth. Vanessa arrived at Colonel Harrington's office escorted by Rodriguez, who had volunteered to personally ensure her friend's safe passage. The past 3 days of confinement had taken their toll. Vanessa looked gaunt. Her eyes held the hollow quality of someone who'd stopped believing in justice, and her normally perfect military bearing had deteriorated into a defensive slouch. "Private Mitchell," Colonel Harrington said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming. I know this has been a difficult time." Vanessa sat rigidly, prepared for another interrogation that would twist her words and paint her as unstable. "Sir, I understand you want to discuss the investigation findings. Actually, I want to discuss what really happened to you." The gentleness in his voice caught Vanessa off guard. She'd grown accustomed to accusatory tones and suspicious questions. This felt different. "Sir, I've spent the morning reviewing security footage from Building C. Very interesting viewing." Harrington turned his computer monitor so she could see the screen. "This is from 2 weeks ago, Tuesday evening. The footage showed Kozlovsky, Thompson, and Morrison escorting Vanessa toward the second-floor bathroom. Even without audio, their body language made the power dynamic clear. 3 men surrounding 1 woman, blocking her path of retreat. "This doesn't look like someone volunteering for cleaning duty," Harrington observed. Vanessa stared at the screen, hardly believing what she was seeing. "You have a video of what they did to me?" "Hours of it. The security system captured most of their activities, though they were careful to conduct the worst abuse in camera blind spots." Harrington clicked another timestamp. "This is from last Thursday night." The new footage showed the men setting up their filming equipment, while Vanessa stood motionless in the hallway, clearly exhausted and defeated. Even in the grainy security video, her psychological deterioration was obvious. "They filmed you for hours," Harrington continued, "but more importantly, they edited that footage to create false evidence against you. We've recovered the original files from their devices." "Their devices?" "Sergeant Major Williams confiscated their phones and laptops this morning. We have everything. The original videos, the edited versions, their text message conversations planning these activities, even their discussions about framing you for vandalism." Vanessa felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. They kept records of what they were doing? Criminals often do. They document their activities because they believe they'll never be caught. Kozlovsky's phone contained over 50 videos of your abuse, plus detailed plans for escalating their harassment. Harrington showed her several text message screenshots. The conversations revealed the systematic nature of their conspiracy. Kozlovsky: "Mitchell's starting to break. Time for phase 2. Morrison: "Got the fake bathroom maintenance order ready. Looks official." Thompson: "She's still fighting back. I need to make her understand resistance is pointless." Walsh: "Video quality from last night was perfect. Should edit together a greatest hits compilation." The messages were damning evidence of premeditated harassment and psychological torture. "Sir, why didn't anyone believe me when I tried to explain?"
Because they created a very convincing false narrative, and they had 6 coordinated witnesses supporting their story. Sergeant Peterson conducted his investigation based on the evidence presented to him, evidence we now know was fabricated. Harrington pulled up another file on his computer. This is the report Dr. Elizabeth Martinez filed after your psychological evaluation. She noted that your responses were consistent with someone who'd experienced prolonged trauma, not someone suffering from paranoid delusions. Her recommendation was for further investigation into possible harassment, but that recommendation was apparently overlooked. Vanessa remembered the session with Dr. Martinez differently. The psychologist had seemed convinced she was having a breakdown. Did Dr. Martinez believe me? She believed something had happened to you. Her clinical notes indicate you showed classic signs of systematic abuse, hypervigilance, emotional numbing, learned helplessness. She was preparing to recommend a full investigation when Peterson's report concluded the case. The revelation that someone in authority had actually recognized her victimization felt overwhelming. For weeks, Vanessa had believed the entire system was against her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we proceed with real justice." Harrington's expression hardened. "I've already initiated court-martial proceedings against all 6 men. They're facing charges including conspiracy, harassment, abuse of subordinates, falsifying military documents, and obstruction of justice." Court-martial? This isn't a minor disciplinary matter, Private Mitchell. These men engaged in systematic torture of a fellow soldier, then attempted to destroy your career with fabricated evidence. In civilian terms, they'd be facing multiple felony charges. Sergeant Major Williams entered the office carrying a thick stack of documents. "Sir, the complete evidence package is ready. Legal Affairs has reviewed everything and confirmed sufficient grounds for all proposed charges." "Excellent. And the other matter we discussed?" "Arranged for 1400 hours today, sir. Full company formation as requested." Harrington turned back to Vanessa. "Private Mitchell, in 1 hour, I'm going to address your entire company about this situation. Part of that address will include a public acknowledgement that you were wrongfully accused and systematically abused by your fellow soldiers." "A public announcement?"
Your reputation has been damaged by their lies. Justice requires not just punishing them, but publicly restoring your honor." Harrington stood from his desk. "However, I want your consent before proceeding. This will mean everyone knows the details of what you endured." Vanessa considered the implications. Public vindication would mean admitting to her entire unit that she'd been victimized, that she'd been broken down and humiliated. But it also meant the truth would finally be known. "I want them to know what really happened," she said. "Then that's what they'll hear." At 1400 hours, Alpha Company assembled in the main courtyard for what they'd been told was a routine administrative briefing. Kozlovsky and his crew stood in formation, confident that their scheme had succeeded. They'd destroyed Vanessa's career, avoided consequences for their abuse, and been praised as responsible soldiers who'd identified a problem case. Colonel Harrington took the podium with an expression that immediately signaled this would not be routine. "I'm here to address a serious matter that has come to my attention," he began. 3 days ago, this company concluded an investigation into alleged misconduct by Private Vanessa Mitchell. That investigation found her guilty of vandalizing military property and behaving erratically. Murmurs rippled through the formation as soldiers glanced toward where Vanessa stood with Rodriguez and Sarah. "I'm here to inform you that the investigation was completely fraudulent." The murmurs stopped instantly. Private Mitchell was not guilty of any misconduct. She was, in fact, the victim of systematic abuse, harassment, and psychological torture conducted by 6 members of this company. Harrington gestured toward the Alpha Company section where Kozlovsky's face had gone pale. For over 3 weeks, Privates Kozlovsky, Thompson, Morrison, Banks, Rivera, and Walsh engaged in a coordinated campaign of harassment against Private Mitchell. They forced her to perform unauthorized cleaning duties, filmed her humiliation for their entertainment, and when she began to break under their abuse, they fabricated evidence to make her appear mentally unstable. The courtyard was dead silent now. Every soldier stood frozen, processing the implications of what their commander was revealing. These 6 men didn't just abuse a fellow soldier, they corrupted the investigative process by presenting doctored evidence and false testimony. They turned this command's disciplinary system into a weapon against their victim. Harrington's voice rose with controlled anger. "This kind of behavior is not just unacceptable, it's criminal. It violates every principle this military stands for. It betrays the trust we place in each other as brothers and sisters in arms." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Private Mitchell endured weeks of torture and then faced false accusations because 6 cowards decided to use their positions to prey on someone they perceived as vulnerable. Their actions have brought shame on this company, this base, and the uniform they wear. Kozlovsky shifted uncomfortably in formation, sweat visible on his forehead despite the cool afternoon air. Effective immediately, all 6 men are confined to quarters pending court-martial proceedings. They will face the full weight of military justice for their crimes.
Harrington turned toward Vanessa's section of the formation. Private Mitchell, front and center. Vanessa marched forward, her step steady despite the emotional turmoil of having her ordeal publicly acknowledged. "Private Mitchell, you have served this command with honor and courage. You endured systematic abuse without breaking your oath or abandoning your duties. When faced with false accusations, you maintained your integrity even when it seemed the entire system was against you." The colonel's voice softened slightly. "On behalf of this command, I apologize for failing to protect you from harassment and for initially believing fabricated evidence. You deserved better from us." "Sir, thank you for finding the truth. The truth was always there, Private Mitchell. It just took us too long to see it." As Vanessa returned to formation, she noticed the expressions of her fellow soldiers had changed completely. Where once she'd seen suspicion and judgment, she now saw respect and shame. Shame that they'd believed the lies, shame that they'd participated in her isolation, and respect for her endurance. But the day's revelations weren't finished yet.
Colonel Harrington had one more announcement that would complete the reversal of fortune for everyone involved. Before dismissing this formation, Colonel Harrington continued, there are additional matters that require immediate attention. He gestured towards Sergeant First Class Peterson, who had been standing near the administrative building looking increasingly uncomfortable throughout the announcement. Sergeant Peterson, front and center. Peterson marched forward with the crisp precision of a career NCO, but his face betrayed deep anxiety about what was coming next. Sergeant Peterson, you conducted the initial investigation into Private Mitchell's alleged misconduct. That investigation concluded she was guilty of vandalism and psychological instability. How do you explain the complete failure of your investigative process? The question hung in the air like a sword. Peterson had 15 years of exemplary service, commendations from 3 combat deployments, and a reputation for fairness that had defined his career. Now he stood before his entire company, facing the possibility that his professional legacy would be destroyed by one catastrophic failure. Sir, I based my conclusions on the evidence presented to me. The video footage appeared authentic, and I had 6 consistent witness statements. Did you interview the alleged victim? Yes, sir. Private Mitchell denied the allegations, but her explanation seemed inconsistent with the physical evidence. Did you seek independent verification of the video evidence? Peterson hesitated. No, sir. The footage appeared genuine, and I had no reason to suspect it had been manipulated. Did you investigate the possibility that the witness statements were coordinated? Another hesitation. The statements were remarkably consistent, but I interpreted that as confirmation of their accuracy rather than evidence of conspiracy. Harrington nodded grimly. Sergeant Peterson, your investigation violated multiple protocols. You failed to conduct forensic analysis of digital evidence. You didn't interview potential witnesses beyond those who came forward voluntarily. You didn't examine the physical evidence at the alleged crime scenes to determine if it was consistent with the reported timeline. The colonel's voice grew stern. Most importantly, you dismissed the victim's account without conducting proper investigation into her claims of harassment. Peterson stood at rigid attention, absorbing each criticism like physical blows. Sir, I have no excuse for these failures. Your failures enabled criminal behavior to continue and nearly destroyed an innocent soldier's career. However, I also recognize that you were the target of a sophisticated deception by soldiers under your command. Harrington paused, considering his next words carefully. Sergeant Peterson, you will be transferred to Fort Campbell immediately for retraining in investigative procedures. Your performance evaluation will reflect serious deficiencies in this case, but given your previous exemplary record, you will retain your rank and position. Consider this a final opportunity to restore your professional reputation. Sir, thank you for the second chance. Don't thank me yet. Prove you've learned from this failure. As Peterson returned to formation, Harrington addressed the broader company. Let me be absolutely clear about the lessons from this incident. Every soldier in this formation has a responsibility to protect their fellow service members from abuse. When harassment occurs, silence makes you complicit. When false accusations are made, failure to speak the truth makes you an accessory. He pointed towards Torres, who had been standing with the communications personnel. Private Torres demonstrated moral courage by coming forward with information that contradicted a closed investigation. She risked her career to ensure justice was served. That's the standard I expect from every soldier under my command. Torres straightened with visible pride at the public recognition of her integrity. Furthermore, Harrington continued, this incident demonstrates why our military values exist. Honor, integrity, and selfless service aren't just words on a poster. They're the foundation that allows us to trust each other with our lives. The colonel's gaze swept across the formation, making eye contact with soldiers throughout the ranks. When you violate those values, you don't just hurt your immediate victims. You damage the cohesion that makes this unit effective. You break the trust that holds our military together. Now came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the final disposition of the 6 conspirators. Privates Kozlowski, Thompson, Morrison, Banks, Rivera, and Walsh have been formally charged under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The charges include conspiracy to commit harassment, abuse of subordinates, obstruction of justice, falsifying official documents, and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. Harrington pulled out a document and read from it formally. Based on the severity of these charges and the systematic nature of their criminal behavior, I am recommending that all 6 men receive dishonorable discharge from the United States Army following their court-martial proceedings. A dishonorable discharge was the military equivalent of a felony conviction. It would follow them for the rest of their lives, affecting employment opportunities, veterans' benefits, and their ability to own firearms. Additionally, I am recommending that the Army Criminal Investigation Command investigate whether federal charges should be filed for violations of Private Mitchell's civil rights. The possibility of federal prosecution meant the men could face civilian prison time on top of their military punishment. Harrington closed the document and looked directly at the 6 men standing in formation. Your actions were not pranks, hazing, or military discipline. They were crimes. You systematically tortured a fellow soldier for your entertainment, then attempted to destroy her career when your abuse was discovered. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You have disgraced your uniforms, betrayed your oath, and violated every principle this military stands for. You will face the full consequences of your choices. The formation remained silent as the implications settled in. 6 military careers were ending in disgrace and possibly imprisonment. But Harrington wasn't finished. Private Mitchell, I have one final announcement regarding your situation. Vanessa stepped forward again, uncertain what else could possibly be revealed. The Army recognizes that your training has been significantly disrupted by this harassment. Under normal circumstances, you would need to repeat several weeks of advanced infantry training to maintain certification. Vanessa's heart sank. After everything she'd endured, would she still have to repeat the program that had become synonymous with her trauma? However, given the exceptional circumstances of your case, and in recognition of the courage you've shown throughout this ordeal, I am authorizing your immediate advancement to your permanent duty station. The unexpected news took a moment to register. Furthermore, based on the recommendation of Dr. Martinez and your demonstrated resilience under extreme adversity, you are being promoted to Private First Class, effective immediately. Vanessa felt her knees wobbled slightly. Not only was she being released from the place of her trauma, but she was being promoted and recognized for her endurance. Sergeant Major Williams will present you with your new rank insignia after formation. As the ceremony concluded and the company was dismissed, Vanessa found herself surrounded by fellow soldiers offering apologies and support. Many admitted they'd sensed something was wrong but hadn't known how to help. Others expressed shame at believing the false accusations. Rodriguez and Sarah flanked her protectively, still amazed at how completely the situation had reversed. "I can't believe it's really over," Sarah said as they walked back toward Building C. "It's not over," Rodriguez corrected. "Now comes the healing." Torres joined them as they entered the building. "Vanessa, I need you to know something," Torres said. "When I decided to come forward, I was terrified. I thought my career was over." "What changed your mind?" "I realized that staying silent would have been worse than losing my career. Some things are more important than personal safety." That evening, as Vanessa packed her belongings for transfer to her new assignment, she reflected on the past month. The trauma would stay with her, she knew that much. The memories of humiliation, fear, and despair wouldn't disappear simply because justice had been served. But something else would stay with her too, the knowledge that truth had ultimately prevailed, that the system, despite its flaws, had eventually protected her. That colleagues like Rodriguez, Sarah, and Torres had risked their own positions to help her. Most importantly, she'd learned that survival wasn't just about enduring abuse, it was about maintaining integrity when everything around you was corrupt, about holding on to hope when hope seemed impossible. As she folded her uniforms, Vanessa noticed her hands were steady for the first time in weeks. The shaking that had plagued her since the harassment began had finally stopped. She was ready for a fresh start. The next morning, Colonel Harrington personally saw her off as she boarded the transport to her new assignment at Fort Richardson, Alaska. "Private First Class Mitchell," he said, using her new rank, "you've shown exceptional character throughout this ordeal. The Army is better for having soldiers like you." "Thank you, sir, for everything. Remember this experience, but don't let it define you. You have a bright future ahead." As the transport pulled away from Fort Braxton, Vanessa watched the buildings disappear behind her. She was leaving with her honor intact, her rank advanced, and her faith in justice restored. The 6 men who had tried to destroy her were beginning a very different journey, one that would lead to disgrace, imprisonment, and the permanent consequences of their choices. Justice had been served, truth had prevailed, and Vanessa Mitchell was finally free to become the soldier she'd always intended to be. 6 months later, the courtroom at Fort Leavenworth was packed with military personnel, legal officials, and media representatives covering what had become known as the Fort Braxton 6 case. The proceedings had drawn national attention as an example of military justice confronting systematic abuse within the ranks. Vanessa sat in the witness section wearing her dress uniform with the newly earned specialist rank she'd achieved at Fort Richardson. Alaska had been exactly what she needed, a fresh environment where her reputation was based on her current performance rather than past trauma. Her commanding officer there, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Davidson, had specifically requested Vanessa's assignment after learning about her case and wanting to provide mentorship to a soldier who'd shown exceptional resilience. The months in Alaska had been transformative. Vanessa had excelled in her duties as a communications specialist, earned the respect of her new unit, and slowly rebuilt her confidence. She'd also been attending counseling sessions with Dr. James Morrison, not the Morrison who tormented her, but a military psychologist who specialized in helping service members recover from workplace trauma. Now she was back to face her tormentors one final time. The 6 defendants sat at separate tables with their court-appointed attorneys. The military justice system had moved with unusual speed, partly by the overwhelming evidence and partly by the Army's desire to demonstrate that such behavior would face swift consequences. Kozlovsky looked dramatically different from the confident ringleader who'd orchestrated months of harassment. Prison confinement had changed him. He'd lost weight, developed a nervous tic, and his formerly aggressive demeanor had been replaced by obvious anxiety. His attorney had attempted to negotiate a plea agreement, but military prosecutors had refused, insisting on full accountability through trial. Judge Advocate General Colonel Michelle Roberts presided over the proceedings. A 25-year veteran with extensive experience in military criminal law, she'd earned a reputation for fairness, combined with zero tolerance for crimes that undermine military discipline. "The court will come to order," Colonel Roberts announced. "We are here for the sentencing phase of United States v. Kozlovsky, Thompson, Morrison, Banks, Rivera, and Walsh. All defendants have been found guilty on all charges following their trials over the past 3 months. The individual trials had been devastating for the defense. The digital evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of text messages, dozens of videos, and detailed planning documents that showed premeditation and coordination. Character witnesses for the defendants had been scarce, while the prosecution had presented testimony from fellow soldiers, medical professionals, and psychological experts about the systematic nature of the abuse. Before proceeding with sentencing, Colonel Roberts continued, "The court will hear victim impact statements. Private First Class Mitchell, you may address the court." Vanessa rose and walked to the podium with steady steps. She'd prepared extensively for this moment, working with prosecutors and her therapist to organize her thoughts and emotions. "Your Honor, 6 months ago, I believed my military career was over. Not because I'd failed in my duties or violated any regulations, but because 6 men decided to systematically destroy my dignity, my confidence, and eventually my reputation through lies and fabricated evidence. Her voice was clear and controlled, showing none of the broken desperation that had characterized her final days at Fort Braxton. They didn't just make me clean toilets. They didn't just humiliate me. They created a psychological prison where every day brought new degradation, where resistance led to escalation, and where seeking help seemed impossible because they'd manipulated the very systems designed to protect me. Vanessa looked directly at each defendant as she spoke. Danny Kozlowski orchestrated this conspiracy with careful planning and deliberate cruelty. He understood exactly how to exploit military hierarchy and unit dynamics to isolate me from support. Marcus Thompson provided the muscle and intimidation that made resistance seem futile. Jake Morrison contributed the technical skills that allowed them to create false evidence. Tyler Banks, Luis Rivera, and Kevin Walsh all participated enthusiastically, adding their own creative touches to my suffering. She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. But perhaps the worst part wasn't the immediate abuse. It was the aftermath, when they turned me into the perpetrator through lies and manipulation. They made my fellow soldiers see me as unstable and dangerous. They corrupted the investigation process and nearly destroyed my career through fraud. Her voice strengthened as she reached the core of her statement. However, I want this court to understand that while these men broke me temporarily, they did not destroy me permanently. I've rebuilt my confidence, proven my worth as a soldier, and learned that the vast majority of military personnel are honorable people who would never engage in such behavior. Vanessa's gaze swept across the courtroom gallery, where Rodriguez, Sarah, Torres, and Colonel Harrington sat in support. The friends who stood by me, the officers who investigated thoroughly when presented with truth, and the system that ultimately delivered justice, these represent the real army. These 6 men represent an aberration that the military justice system is designed to remove. She turned back to face the defendants directly. I don't forgive you. What you did was deliberate, systematic torture of a fellow soldier. You planned it, executed it, and tried to cover it up through fraud. You showed no remorse until you were caught, and even then your primary concern was avoiding consequences rather than acknowledging the harm you caused. Her final words carried the weight of absolute conviction. But I also don't fear you anymore. You have no power over my future, my career, or my sense of self-worth. I've moved beyond what you did to me, while you'll spend years dealing with the consequences of your choices. As Vanessa returned to her seat, the silence in the courtroom was complete. Even the defendant's attorneys seemed affected by the power and clarity of her statement. Colonel Roberts then heard additional impact statements from Rodriguez, who described watching her friend's systematic destruction, and from Torres, who detailed the moral courage required to come forward with truth. Dr. Martinez testified about the psychological damage the abuse had caused and Vanessa's remarkable recovery process. Colonel Harrington spoke about the broader impact on unit cohesion and military readiness when soldiers couldn't trust their fellow service members. The defense attorneys made final appeals for leniency, claiming their clients' previous service records and claiming the behavior had been misguided hazing rather than deliberate abuse. None of the defendants chose to make personal statements, following their lawyer's advice to avoid further self-incrimination. Colonel Roberts recessed for 2 hours to consider sentencing recommendations from both prosecution and defense teams. When court reconvened, her demeanor left no doubt about the severity of the sentences to come. The defendants' actions represent some of the most serious violations of military discipline this court has encountered, she began. This was not hazing, misconduct, or poor judgment. This was systematic torture of a fellow soldier, followed by conspiracy to obstruct justice through fabricated evidence. She addressed each defendant individually, detailing their specific roles in the conspiracy and the aggravating factors that influenced her sentencing decisions. Private Kozlowski, as the ringleader of this conspiracy, you orchestrated months of psychological torture and showed sophisticated planning in your criminal behavior. You are sentenced to 8 years confinement, reduction to the lowest enlisted grade, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and dishonorable discharge. Kozlowski visibly sagged as the sentence was announced. 8 years in military prison would effectively end any possibility of rebuilding his life upon release. Private Thompson, your role as enforcer and your enthusiastic participation in escalating the abuse warrants severe punishment. You are sentenced to 6 years confinement, reduction to the lowest enlisted grade, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and dishonorable discharge. She continued through each defendant with sentences ranging from 4 to 6 years based on their individual participation levels. All received dishonorable discharges, ensuring they would carry the stigma of their crimes for life. Additionally, Colonel Roberts announced, "I am recommending that the Army Criminal Investigation Command forward this case to federal prosecutors for consideration of civil rights charges. The systematic nature of this abuse may warrant additional prosecution under federal hate crime statutes."
As the defendants were led away in shackles, Vanessa felt a complex mixture of emotions. Justice had been served more completely than she'd ever dared hope, but she also felt sadness at the waste of human potential and the damage these men had inflicted on themselves and others. Outside the courthouse, reporters sought interviews with the key participants. Vanessa declined most requests, but agreed to speak with Stars and Stripes, the military newspaper, to ensure accurate reporting of the case's resolution. "The most important thing people should understand," she told the reporter, "is that this case shows the military justice system can work when people have the courage to seek truth. My nightmare ended because good people refused to accept lies and fought for justice." That evening, Vanessa had dinner with Rodriguez, Sarah, and Torres, who had all traveled to Fort Leavenworth for the sentencing. 8 years, Sarah said, still processing the severity of Kozlovsky's sentence. "I didn't think they'd get that much time." "They earned every day of it," Rodriguez replied firmly. "What they did was worse than many violent crimes because they used the military system itself as a weapon." Torres raised her glass in a toast, "To justice served and friends who never gave up." As they clinked glasses, Vanessa reflected on how completely her life had changed since those dark days at Fort Braxton. She'd found her strength, proven her worth, and helped ensure that other soldiers wouldn't face similar abuse without consequences. The next morning, she would fly back to Alaska to continue building her military career. But tonight, she celebrated the knowledge that truth had triumphed over lies. Courage had defeated cruelty, and justice had finally been served. 2 years after the Fort Leavenworth sentencing, Sergeant Vanessa Mitchell stood before a packed auditorium at the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. She wore the dress blue uniform that had once seemed like an impossible dream during her darkest days at Fort Braxton, now adorned with ribbons that told the story of her remarkable journey. The Army Achievement Medal for exceptional performance in Alaska, the Meritorious Service Medal for developing innovative communication protocols, and most recently, the Soldier's Medal for heroism in a civilian rescue operation. The audience consisted of senior military officers, Department of Defense officials, congressional staff members, and advocates for military reform. Vanessa had been invited to speak at a symposium on preventing harassment and abuse in military environments. Her case had become a landmark example of both the failures and successes of military justice systems. "Distinguished guests, fellow service members," she began, her voice carrying the confidence that came from years of proven leadership. 4 years ago, I was a broken young woman who believed her military career was over before it had truly begun. Today, I stand before you as living proof that survival is possible, justice can prevail, and the military can learn from its darkest failures. The transformation was remarkable to those who remembered the frightened, isolated private from Fort Braxton. Vanessa had not only rebuilt her career, but had become a recognized expert in military communications and a sought-after speaker on leadership and resilience. Her assignment in Alaska had lasted 18 months, during which she distinguished herself in increasingly responsible positions. Her technical innovations in Arctic communication systems had earned notice from Pentagon officials, leading to her selection for advanced training at the Signal Center of Excellence in Georgia. But it was an incident during a training exercise that had truly defined her character and brought national attention to her story.
While conducting field communications tests near Anchorage, Vanessa had witnessed a civilian aircraft crash in remote terrain. Without hesitation, she'd used her military communications equipment to coordinate rescue efforts, personally trekked through dangerous conditions to reach survivors, and provided emergency medical care until professional rescuers arrived. Her actions had saved 3 lives and demonstrated the kind of selfless service that exemplified military values at their best. The Soldier's Medal citation had read, "For heroism not involving actual conflict with an armed enemy." Sergeant Mitchell's quick thinking, technical expertise, and personal courage under extreme conditions resulted in the successful rescue of civilian aircraft crash survivors. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself, her unit, and the United States Army. More importantly to Vanessa, the rescue had proven to herself that she could act decisively under pressure, that her experiences at Fort Braxton had strengthened rather than weakened her fundamental character. "The harassment I experienced was not unique," she continued, addressing the audience. "What made my case significant was not the abuse itself, but the systematic way my abusers manipulated military systems to cover their crimes and nearly destroy an innocent person through fabricated evidence." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, which showed statistics about military harassment and assault cases. Every year, thousands of service members experience workplace harassment, sexual assault, and abuse of power. The vast majority of these cases never reach the level of visibility that mine achieved. Most victims suffer in silence, leave the military voluntarily, or see their careers derailed by systems that protect perpetrators rather than survivors. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, which showed statistics about military harassment and assault cases. Every year, thousands of service members experience workplace harassment, sexual assault, and abuse of power. The vast majority of these cases never reach the level of visibility that mine achieved. Most victims suffer in silence, leave the military voluntarily, or see their careers derailed by systems that protect perpetrators rather than survivors.
The data was sobering. Despite reforms and increased awareness, military harassment remained a persistent problem that undermined readiness and destroyed lives. However, my case also demonstrates that change is possible when good people refuse to accept injustice. Colonel Harrington, Sergeant Major Williams, Dr. Martinez, and my fellow soldiers Rodriguez, Chen, and Torres, they represent the military at its best. They show that leadership means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Vanessa advanced to slides showing policy changes that had been implemented partly in response to her case. New requirements for digital evidence analysis, independent investigation protocols, and victim advocacy programs had been adopted across multiple military installations. The Fort Braxton 6 case led to significant reforms in how the military investigates harassment allegations. But policies alone are insufficient. Cultural change requires every service member to understand that silence in the face of abuse makes you complicit in that abuse. She paused, making eye contact with officers throughout the audience. When you see harassment happening, you have a moral obligation to intervene. When you hear false accusations being spread, you have a duty to seek truth. When systems fail to protect the innocent, you must find ways to work around those failures. The second half of her presentation focused on practical leadership strategies for preventing harassment and supporting victims. She discussed early warning signs of toxic unit culture, effective intervention techniques, and methods for creating environments where reporting abuse was seen as honorable rather than disloyal. Leadership is not about rank or position, she emphasized. Private Torres demonstrated more real leadership by coming forward with evidence than some colonels show in their entire careers. Courage doesn't require authority, it just requires conviction. During the question and answer session, a lieutenant colonel asked about the personal cost of becoming a public advocate for military justice reform. "The visibility has been challenging," Vanessa admitted. "Everywhere I go in the military, people know my story. Some see me as a hero, others as a victim, and a few still view me as a troublemaker who made the Army look bad. The attention can be overwhelming."
She considered her words carefully before continuing. "But I've learned that survival isn't enough. Having overcome what those men did to me, I have an obligation to help prevent others from experiencing similar abuse. If my visibility helps even one soldier find the courage to report harassment or helps one leader recognize toxic behavior, then the personal cost is worthwhile." A civilian Department of Defense official asked about the current status of the 6 convicted men. "Kozlowski is serving his sentence at the United States Disciplinary Barracks. He'll be eligible for parole in 2 more years, though his dishonorable discharge ensures he'll never serve in the military again. The others are serving their sentences at various facilities. None have shown genuine remorse for their actions. Their appeals have focused on procedural challenges rather than accepting responsibility." She added quietly, "I hope they eventually find redemption, but their punishment serves an important purpose. Other potential abusers need to understand that such behavior will face severe consequences." After the formal presentation, Vanessa was approached by a young female lieutenant who'd been sitting in the front row. "Sergeant Mitchell, I'm Lieutenant Jessica Walsh," the woman said. "I wanted to thank you for sharing your story. I've been dealing with harassment in my unit, and hearing how you survived and thrived gives me hope." Vanessa felt the familiar mixture of sadness and determination that came with meeting other victims. "Tell me what's happening." Lieutenant Walsh described a situation involving a senior NCO who'd been making inappropriate comments, creating hostile environments during training, and retaliating against women who complained. The pattern was disturbingly familiar. "Have you documented the incidents?" Vanessa asked. "I've been keeping detailed records, but I'm afraid reporting will end my career. People say he has connections with senior officers." "Connections won't protect him if you have solid evidence and present it through proper channels. But you need allies, other witnesses, advocates, people who can corroborate your account." Vanessa spent 30 minutes providing specific advice about documentation, reporting procedures, and support resources. She gave Walsh her contact information and promised to provide assistance if needed. "Remember," Vanessa concluded, "your silence protects him and endangers every woman who serves under him after you. Reporting takes courage, but courage is contagious. Others will follow your lead if you show them it's possible to seek justice." That evening, Vanessa called Rodriguez, who was now a staff sergeant stationed in Germany and pursuing a degree in military justice. "How did the presentation go?" Rodriguez asked. "Good. Difficult, but good. I met another victim afterward, a lieutenant dealing with harassment from a senior NCO. Did you give her your contact information?"
Of course. She reminds me of myself 4 years ago, scared, isolated, convinced that reporting will destroy her career. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever regret becoming so public about what happened?" "Sometimes," Vanessa admitted. "It would be easier to move on completely, to let my story fade into history. But then I meet someone like Lieutenant Walsh, or I see statistics showing how many service members still suffer in silence, and I remember why this matters. You've saved more people than you know. We all did. None of this would have been possible without you, Sarah, Torres, Colonel Harrington, and everyone else who refused to accept lies." As they talked, Vanessa reflected on her remarkable journey. From the broken young woman who'd once scrubbed toilets under the cruel supervision of 6 tormentors, she'd become a respected NCO, a decorated hero, and a national advocate for military justice reform. Her experiences at Fort Braxton would always be part of her story, but they no longer defined her future. She'd transformed trauma into purpose, survival into service, and victimization into victory. The 6 men who'd tried to destroy her were serving prison sentences that would affect them for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, Vanessa was building a legacy of leadership, courage, and positive change that would outlast any punishment. In 3 months, she would be promoted to staff sergeant. In 6 months, she would begin officer candidate school, having been selected for a direct commission based on her exceptional service and leadership potential. The scared young woman from Montana who'd once questioned whether she belonged in the military had become exactly the kind of leader the Army needed for its future. Justice had been served,
Truth had prevailed, and Sergeant Vanessa Mitchell was finally, truly free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.